Welcome to Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance in Los Angeles. Today, joined by Galperin. He is the controller for the city of Los Angeles, which just passed its budget, a $9.2 billion budget, I understand.
Yes.
In the run-up to the budget, though, you interfaced with the council, with the mayor, and talked about some of the challenges surrounding the budget. Let's talk about some of them. I focus on compensation, benefits, the P word, pensions.
Yes.
Talk us through it, sir.
Well, $9.2 billion is a lot of money, but at the same time, it's never enough to keep up with all of the needs that we have in the city of Los Angeles. And unfortunately, our revenues are not growing at quite the same rate that our expenditures are.
Right.
Now, we have a very large staff. I do payroll in my office for about 45,000 people.
Really?
And we also have, of course, so many vendors that sell goods and services to the city. So the question is, how in the long term can we start improving the finances of the city of LA? That's what I've been really focused on.
And I want to talk about that. Before we get to revenue, the revenue side, I want to focus, if we can, though, on these issues of continuing employee obligations.
Yes.
Because, look, every year folks will get raises. The health care situation is unclear. I mean, I know that the city of Los Angeles isn't directly impacted by the Affordable Care Act or its replacement if we have one. And then there's the question, as I said, of pensions. I mean, pension obligations are just, they're skyrocketing.
Pension obligations have actually been taking up a larger share of the budget, as we all know. That's not just true in the city of LA, that's true
Of course.
Throughout the country. And LA actually has 3 different pension systems for its employees, each with its own investment portfolios, each with its own opportunities and its own challenges. Of course, healthcare costs have been growing everywhere in the nation, although our healthcare costs, while they've increased over many years, have been increasing a little bit less than the average.
Not bad.
Part of that is because of making good decisions. We're also very focused now on what do we do to improve employee health care, because the healthier our employees are, the less expenses we're going to see in emergency rooms for them and for their families.
When we look at the health of the fiscal state of our city, I presume you are also looking at the uncertainty surrounding what we may or may not get from Washington.
Yes.
There's questions of just general austerity, I guess you could say, but then there's the question of whether we're a sanctuary city to the extent that the new administration wants to punish sanctuary cities. How does that play into your calculation?
Well, it's still uncertain exactly what we're going to get and not get from Washington under this administration and under this Congress. What's always upset me, along with many other Californians, is that for every dollar that we send to Washington, D.C. and California, we get back about 79 cents. And by the way, that is even worse in the city of LA. So I believe that we're entitled to a lot more than we're getting. We're going to see what happens under this administration, and we're going to have to be careful how we spend the money, just because we don't know yet.
Let's talk about the revenue side, just like you said. What we know is that at a certain level we need to grow our revenues. It's tricky to say that because that suggests that we're somehow looking for profit, but that's not where we're going. But I do want to talk about growing or creating sources of revenue. You pointed out, for example, when we look at kind of the new economy, transit occupancy tax is a big way cities bring in money. That's basically hotels. You know, you see there's always a TOT tax no matter where you go. But folks aren't necessarily staying at hotels. They're staying at homes. There's the whole kind of home sharing economy. And I know we're trying to figure out how to capture that. Some cities are banning that. I don't know that we're going there. Talk to us about that element, sir.
Sure. Well, the city needs to find ways to encourage business and to really grow businesses in the city of LA. And that also means that we want to see revenues from them, but we can't overtax them, because if we do that, then we're going to actually be decreasing in the final analysis of what we get from businesses in the city. So that's really important to take into consideration. We do get a good amount of money from the so-called transitory occupancy tax, which is from hotels. Hotels have been seeing pretty good occupancy rates because a lot of people still want to come visit LA. But there's also the question of how do we collect that from, for example, new economy such as Airbnb. We're also going to be having marijuana legalized.
And let's talk about that. I think
And that's also going to be a revenue source, but a set of challenges for law enforcement, for neighborhoods, for our communities.
I think it's critical that we really investigate that, because what we know is under the proposition that legalized marijuana,
Yes.
Municipalities can tax. I mean, we know that the state is taxing, then there's the grow tax and the cultivation tax
Correct.
and this tax and that tax. But be that as it may, I believe Los Angeles has already passed a tax as a result of the passage of the marijuana initiative. You talk about taxing and overtaxing. Are we at risk that now we've overtaxed because there's so many taxes coming down on legal marijuana sales?
Well, in the case of marijuana, I don't think that we've overtaxed.
Okay.
There's going to be plenty of demand for it in
What? No?
in Los Angeles and in California generally. And I think the voters very correctly have imposed what are going to be taxes that are put in place for both the medical as well as for the recreational use of marijuana. But we're going to have expenses, for
Right.
example, of law enforcement of how do we collect that tax. It's still very much a cash-oriented business. How do we know that we're getting what we're supposed to get?
How?
do we make sure that neighborhoods are protected?
So how do we? Because I know, for example, I've spoken with members of the State Board of Equalization. They've actually shown me pictures of over $200,000 in cash brought to them to pay as tax. They wanted to be upstanding citizens, but they didn't have a banking system, so they brought them $200,000 in cash. How is the city of LA going to manage that if we don't have banking systems? And with the new administration, I don't know that we're going to see movement on that.
Well, actually, we have a number of recommendations that we've been making around that whole subject of how we can make sure that they are observing the law. Part of that is about having cameras. Part of that is about having cash counting machines. Part of that is about what we can do to make sure that those businesses that are legitimate are getting banked, hopefully, so that they have banking relationships.
But where? Because technically it's still illegal for banks to accept money from marijuana establishments. I mean, do we set up our own, I don't know, is it a city chartered bank or state chartered bank? I don't even know what that would look
There's
like.
been some discussion about a state or maybe a city bank that can help solve that problem. This is an evolving area of the law. We're not going to have it all sorted out by next year. It's going to take a number of years, but it's going to happen.
Let's talk about Los Angeles as landlord.
Yes.
You said, I think, was it 9,000 properties? Is that what you said, sir?
Actually, the city of LA and the taxpayers, each and every one of you out there, own 8,975 distinct pieces of property just within the county of LA. We're arguably the largest owner of real estate in the county of LA.
So talk to us about how you, the city, can maximize revenues in an appropriate fashion.
Well, I think there's great opportunity with these properties. Some of them are going to stay exactly the way they are, and they should. We have wonderful parks, and we have great municipal facilities, and so many other places that people depend on, our libraries. But we also own parking lots. We own empty lots. We own commercial properties, residential. We own retail. And we have not, up until now, really known what we own, although now I have mapped every single one of these properties. You can go online to propertypanel.la, and you'll see every single property that we own. But I'm also calling for the creation of a chief asset manager so that we really look at this as a portfolio that can add value for the taxpayers and for the residents and for the businesses of the city of LA.
So in our final moments, how do we get that chief asset manager hired? Do you need to go to the city council, the mayor?
Well,
can you do it yourself?
I can't do it myself because, by the way, I don't control everything as city controller. Although I try to keep the finances in some sort of control. But actually, there's a proposal that's now in front of the city council. It will probably take a little bit of time, but I'm very optimistic that it's going to happen.
Okay, his name is Ron Galperin. He is the controller. He doesn't control everything, but he's a controller of the city of Los Angeles. We are in Los Angeles today. I'm Brad Pomerance on Local Edition.